Episode 1. If you ever wanted a car that looks like it should come with its own theme music, the 1984-87 Buick Grand National is your villain, not a cartoon villain, more like the quiet guy in a black suit who doesn't raise his voice, doesn't brag, and still somehow ends the conversation. It's a regal coupe that Buick turned into a rolling warning label, and they did it without stripes, scoops the size of picnic tables, or a V8 bellowing, "Hey everybody, I'm fast." No, this one whispers, then it launches. This is Chrome and Gasoline. I'm Alex, and today we're talking about the 1984 through 1987 Grand National, the car that proved you can be terrifying with 6 cylinders, a turbo, and an attitude problem. Let's do the 1980s cop drama test right up front. Picture the scene. It's night, the streetlights are orange, and there's a detective with a loose tie yelling into a brick phone. In the background, a black Grand National rolls by like a shadow with headlights. Does it belong in that chase scene? Absolutely. It doesn't even need to chase anybody. It just shows up, and the other cars start making excuses. Now, the Grand National wasn't some exotic supercar. That's part of the joke. It's based on the GMG Body Regal, a polite, square-ish American coupe platform from the era when shoulder pads were a lifestyle choice. But Buick did something weird and wonderful. Instead of shouting about horsepower, they went all in on turbocharged torque. In a decade where a lot of performance cars were still recovering from emissions and fuel crises, Buick walked in like, what if we just used boost? Welcome to boost theology. Because with the Grand National, boost is not just a mechanical concept, it's a belief system. It's the moment you're cruising along like a normal person, and then the turbo spools, the engine takes a deep breath, and suddenly the car's personality changes. It's like it was pretending to be civilized, and then remembered it has a reputation. Under the hood sits a turbocharged 3.8-liter V6, and I know what you're thinking. A V6? In the 1980s? In a performance legend? Yes. That's the whole point. The Grand National is basically a prank pulled on every loudmouth V8 at the stoplight. It's the automotive version of showing up to a weightlifting contest in a cardigan and then deadlifting the entire building. The Grand National also leaned into tech that was becoming the new normal, electronic fuel injection and engine management. You didn't have to be a carburetor whisperer with a screwdriver and a prayer every time the weather changed. The car had an ECU, computer control, monitoring things like air, fuel, and boost-related behavior, trying to keep this turbocharged party from turning into an expensive smoke machine. And the best part is how this car delivers speed. It doesn't feel like a high-revving sports car begging you to thrash it. It feels like torque showing up early and staying late. The turbo makes the V6 feel bigger than it is, like it's cheating. Because it is cheating, it's legal cheating. It's the kind of cheating that comes with a warranty, back when warranties were still an idea. Now, we've got to be factually careful here, because Grand National legend has been bench raced into mythology. So let's do the bench racing translator. When someone says, my buddy's stock Grand National had like 900 horsepower, what they mean is, it felt fast, it scared me, and I'm emotionally rounding up. The real story is better anyway. Buick built a genuinely quick car for its era, with a drivetrain and tuning philosophy that made it brutally effective from a roll or a light. It didn't need fantasy numbers. It just required that black paint, that turbo, and the confidence to let other people underestimate it. And people did underestimate it, because it was a Buick. At the time, Buick had a reputation for comfort and quiet. The Grand National is what happens when a polite brand decides to commit a minor crime. So here's the setup for our series. We're going to talk about the engine, especially what changed in the later years, what the turbo and intercooler do, how the fueling and computer control made it work, and the transmission choice that helped the car put power down in a very 1980s way. We'll also separate the early cars from the later intercooled ones without turning this into a trivia contest. But for now, appreciate the concept. a blacked-out, deceptively ordinary-looking coupe with a turbo V6 that can make other performance cars feel like they showed up to the wrong address. Boost theology. Lesson number 1. You don't need 8 cylinders to be a legend. You need timing, torque, and the ability to look innocent while doing something completely unreasonable. Episode 2. Let's get into the heart of the Grand National. That 3.8-liter Buick 5.6, the turbocharger, and the reason the car feels like it's got a hidden trapdoor under the accelerator. And yes, I can hear the V8 crowd warming up their arguments like it's a high school debate team. Relax. This isn't anti-V8. This is pro-chaos, and the Turbo 5.6 is excellent at it. In the mid-80s Grand National world, the engine you'll hear referenced most is the Turbo 3.8 V6, and in the later, most famous versions, especially 1986 and 1987, it's commonly associated with the intercooled setup. People often call that later combination, by its engine code, LC2. If you don't care about codes, here's the simple truth. Buick built a V6 that was engineered to live with boost and deliver torque, like it had something to prove. Here's your turbo basics, chrome and gasoline style. A turbocharger is basically an exhaust-powered air pump. The engine pushes exhaust out. The turbo uses that exhaust flow to spin a turbine, which turns a compressor that shoves more air into the engine. More air means you can add more fuel. More air plus more fuel means a bigger bang. A bigger bang means more power. It's like giving the engine a second set of lungs, and yesterday's exhaust fuels those lungs. The thing about turbo power, though, is it comes with heat. Compressing air warms it up, and hot air is less dense. Also, heat is the universe's way of asking, are you sure you wanted to do this? This is where the intercooler becomes the hero in the 1986 to 1987 intercooled cars. The intercooler cools the compressed air before it goes into the engine. Cooler air is denser, which means more oxygen per gulp. And cooler air also helps reduce the chances of NOx, unwanted combustion drama, which matters a lot when you're stuffing extra air into cylinders and asking them to behave. If you're doing boost theology, the intercooler is basically baptism. It takes the hot, excited air and calms it down so it can do the job correctly. Now, the earlier Grand Nationals, 1984 and 1985, are often talked about as the non-intercooled hot air setup. That nickname isn't an insult, it's just describing the layout. No intercooler means the air going into the engine is warmer, which can affect how aggressive the whole system is compared to later intercooled cars. The later cars became the poster children for a reason. Intercooling made the combination more potent and more consistent. But let's talk about why this V6 is such a good match for turbocharging in the first place. A V6 like this can be compact, and with the right engineering, it can handle boost. Turbocharging isn't about cylinder count, it's about airflow management and durability. The Grand National's V6 is all about making torque in the real world. You don't need to rev it to the moon. The turbo helps it deliver that shove right where you live, on the street, in traffic, at the stoplight where someone in a loud car is doing that "I'm not racing, I'm just accelerating aggressively" thing. And here's where the electronic fuel injection and engine control come in. These cars used computerized engine management that monitored and adjusted fueling and other behaviors to keep the turbo setup working. I'm not going to turn this into a wiring diagram podcast, but conceptually, the computer is acting like a bouncer at a nightclub. It's letting in air and fuel, it's trying to keep things stable, and it's not letting the party get so out of hand that the engine starts making expensive noises. This is also why the Grand National earned a reputation as a tuning-friendly platform. Not because it was magic, but because it was already built around boost and electronic control. It responded to changes in a way that made sense. People love that. People also love exaggerating that. So, bench racing translator time. If somebody says, these things came from the factory basically maxed out and ready to beat anything ever made, what they mean is, for its era, it was shockingly quick, and it did it in a way that made other cars feel outdated. The Grand National wasn't a fairy tale. It was just a well-executed idea, forced induction, solid torque, and enough computer control to keep it street-friendly. And let's not ignore the vibe factor. Open the hood and it doesn't scream exotic. It looks like a V6 with boost plumbing. That's the funniest part. It's the automotive equivalent of a quiet office worker who turns out to be a championship boxer. So if episode 1 was the legend and the attitude, episode 2 is the reason the legend works. Turbocharging made a V6 act like something bigger. Intercooling, especially in 1986 to 87, helped it do that more effectively. And electronic fuel injection and engine management were the grown-ups in the room, making sure the whole thing didn't set the curtains on fire. Boost theology lesson number 2. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's pressurized. Episode 3. Now let's talk about a part of the Grand National story that doesn't get enough respect at car meets because it's not shiny: the transmission. Specifically, the 200-4R 4-speed automatic with overdrive. And before the manual transmission crowd starts sharpening pitchforks, let me remind you, the Grand National was engineered to be effective, not to win internet arguments. The 200-4R is a 4-speed automatic that includes overdrive, which in the mid-80s is basically Buick saying, yes, you can be fast and still drive on the highway without the engine screaming like it's trapped in a closet. Overdrive matters because it lowers the cruising RPM, which improves comfort, fuel economy, and long-distance driving. The Grand National is not a fragile, temperamental toy. It's a street car with a dark personality. Here's where the automatic actually makes a lot of sense with turbo torque. Turbocharged engines often like consistency. They like being loaded up predictably. An automatic transmission can help keep the engine in the sweet spot where boost builds smoothly. And if you've ever driven a turbo car where you lift off the throttle and everything goes sleepy for a moment, you understand why maintaining momentum and load can feel like part of the magic. The Grand National doesn't need you to be a hero with a clutch. It requires you to be the kind of person who can keep a straight face while embarrassing somebody who showed up revving. Now, I'm going to be careful not to get too deep into how to modify territory, because the point here is understanding the car, not turning your driveway into a parts catalog. But it's fair to say the 200-4R has a reputation for being a key player in the Grand National's performance identity. And owners often talk about durability and upgrades in the same sentence, because turbo torque is not gentle. Turbo torque is the friend who doesn't knock before entering. It just shows up and rearranges the furniture. Let's do the 1980s cop drama test again, but drivetrain edition. Imagine a chase scene. The driver punches it. The transmission doesn't ask questions. It just drops a gear like it's throwing a chair in a bar fight. The turbo starts spooling up and the car surges forward with that smooth, force-fed shove. That's the Grand National vibe. It's not frantic, it's decisive. And we should talk traction, because this car is a lesson in physics disguised as a stylish coupe. You've got a rear-wheel drive layout, a torqued heavy turbo engine, and tires that, by modern standards, were not exactly sticky miracles. So what happens when boost hits? Sometimes the rear tires have a conversation. Sometimes it's a debate. Sometimes it's a full-on argument, and the tires lose. This is where the Grand National's personality really shows. It's a sleeper, but it's also honest about being a handful when you disrespect the throttle. You don't drive it like a gentle commuter and then suddenly floor it mid-corner and expect it to applaud your courage. The car will respond. It will just respond like an 80s performance legend with rear-wheel drive and a turbo with enthusiasm and a little bit of sideways punctuation. Now, bench racing translator. If someone says, oh yeah, these things hook like a modern AWD car, what they mean is, I once got a good launch on a warm night with decent tires, and I will now build my entire identity around it. The reality is more charming. Part of the Grand National's story is that it was brutally fast for its era, but it still lived in the real world. You had to drive it with some respect, and that respect is half the fun. The other half is the look on someone's face when a black Buick they underestimated suddenly moves like it's late for a bank heist. So when you think about the Grand National drivetrain, don't just think turbo V6. Please think of the whole system. Engine delivering torque, automatic transmission keeping it in the power, and a rear-drive chassis that makes you earn your victory a little. It's a complete recipe. And the 200-4R, boring as it sounds, is one of the reasons the recipe works. Boost theology, lesson number 3. It's not just about making power. It's about delivering it as you meant it. Episode 4. All right, let's split the Grand National story the way fans usually do, without turning it into a trivia knife fight. The 1984-85 cars and the 1986-87 cars share the same core identity: blacked-out menace, turbocharged V6 attitude, and sleeper energy so strong it should come with a disclaimer. But the later years, especially 1986 and 1987, became the version most people picture first, and the reason comes down to one word: intercooler. The earlier cars, 1984 and 1985, are commonly referred to as the hot air setup. That's not an insult, it's a description. The turbocharged air goes into the engine without an intercooler cooling it down first. Hot, compressed air is still compressed air, so yes, it still makes power. And yes, it still delivers that boosty torque surge that makes the car feel like it's bending the rules. But then 1986 and 1987 show up with intercooling, which, in practical terms, makes the whole system feel more confident. Cooler intake air generally supports more consistent performance and makes it easier to manage combustion under boost. In the real world, that can translate to a car that feels stronger, more repeatable, and more willing to keep doing the thing you bought it for, quietly embarrassing louder cars. This is boost theology at its most obvious. The 1984 to 1985 cars are like the early scripture: powerful, revered, and sometimes misunderstood. The 1986 to 1987 cars are the revised edition with better diagrams and fewer contradictions. The faith is the same. The delivery got sharper. Now, why did Buick end up building this legend at all? Because the mid-80s were weird. Performance was coming back, but not in the simple bigger car, bigger cam, bigger noise way. Electronics were taking over, emissions rules existed, fuel economy mattered, and Buick, of all brands, leaned into a turbocharged V6 strategy that made a lot of sense for the moment. It gave them performance without requiring a huge displacement engine. It also gave them a character no one expected from Buick, which is like finding out your quiet neighbor used to tour with a punk band. And the chassis context matters too. This is a G-body coupe. It's not tiny. It's not a featherweight sports car. It's a street-friendly, real car-sized coupe you can actually live with, which is part of why the Grand National's performance feels so disrespectful to the competition. It's not supposed to be that quick. It looks like it should be politely yielding in the right lane. Instead, it's out here rewriting reputations. Let's do the 1980s cop drama test again, but this time it's the myth-building version. You've got a group of guys in a neon-lit parking lot. Someone says, "That's a Grand National." Everyone suddenly speaks quieter. The owner doesn't have to rev it. He just starts it, and you hear that slightly industrial V6 note with the turbo plumbing doing its thing. Then there's the moment, maybe on the road, maybe at a light, where the car rolls into boost and surges forward like it was tugged by a cable. That sensation builds legend, and because it's a sleeper, the legend spreads faster. Nobody wants to admit they got surprised by a Buick, so they tell the story differently, and then the story gets told again and again, and suddenly the car becomes folklore. Bench racing translator time. When someone says these cars were basically unbeatable, what they mean is, they had a real advantage in how they made usable power and how they delivered it, and that advantage showed up where it counts: street conditions, real roads, real reactions. The Grand National wasn't magic. It was smart engineering and great execution in the right era. And I want to give the earlier cars their respect. The 1984 to 85 hot air versions are part of the lineage and part of the charm. They're the reason the intercooled cars exist. They're the before in a story where Buick kept refining the idea until it became a cultural icon. The later cars get the spotlight, but the earlier ones are still wearing the same black suit, still carrying the same secret: turbo torque in a package nobody expects. So if you're looking at the 1984 to 87 run as a whole, think of it like this. It's one continuous theme: stealth performance. The early years introduced the menace. The later years sharpened the tools. And all of it added up to a car that still makes people grin, argue, and tell stories that start with, "You're not gonna believe this, Buick." Boost theology lesson number 4. Legends aren't always born loud. Sometimes they're refined until they're inevitable. Episode 5. I'll tell you my Grand National story, and I'm warning you up front. It's one of those moments that permanently changes how you see a car. Not because it was dramatic in a movie way, but because it was dramatic in a human way. Quiet, quick, and deeply embarrassing for somebody who deserved it. Years ago, I'm standing in a parking lot at dusk, one of those evenings where the sky looks like it's been color graded by a 1980s cinematographer. I'm talking cars with a guy who has that relaxed, older owner vibe, the kind of guy who doesn't sell you on the car. He just lets the car exist, like a well-behaved dog that could absolutely bite through a steel door if it chose to. And there it is, a black Buick Grand National. No screaming paint, no giant hood scoop shouting for attention. Just black-on-black menace, sitting low and serious like it's waiting for a phone call. I do the thing everybody does. I make the face, the respectful face, the face that says, "I know what this is," even though part of my brain is still going, "It's a Buick, calm down." The owner smiles like he's heard that internal argument before. He opens the hood and it's not a cathedral of chrome. It's a V6 with turbo plumbing and purpose. He says something simple, something that sounds almost casual, like he's describing a lawnmower. And I remember thinking, this car is not trying to impress me. This car is trying to get away with something. We end up on the road a little later, nothing reckless, nothing dramatic. Just a normal stretch of pavement where you can feel a car without needing a racetrack or a courtroom. I'm riding along, listening. The engine note is different from the V8 chorus I grew up with. It's more mechanical, more businesslike, not romantic, but confident. And then he rolls into it. Not a stomp, not a hold my beer, just a smooth squeeze of the throttle, like he's turning up a dimmer switch. At first, the car is polite. It's driving normally. Then you feel that moment when the turbo starts to spool, like the car takes a breath, and the whole world shifts forward. It's a shove, but not a chaotic shove. It's not screaming. It's not flailing. It's like getting pushed by a big hand that knows exactly where your spine is. The boost comes in, and suddenly the Grand National is doing that thing it does where it feels like it's pulling the street toward itself. And my brain, my very confident car nerd brain, goes, "Oh." So this is why people talk like that. We come up to a light later, and there's a guy in a loud car next to us. You know the type. The car is announcing itself at idle, like it wants applause for existing. He's doing that sideways glance, that "I'm not racing, but I'm emotionally racing" posture. The Grand National is just sitting there, quiet, black, and unimpressed. I'm thinking, please don't. We don't need this. This is a nice evening. I would like my heart rate to remain in the human category. The owner glances over, smiles, just slightly, and looks forward again. The light changes. He doesn't launch it like a drag strip hero. He just goes, smooth, controlled, boost building. And the loud car next to us does what loud cars often do. It makes noise first, then tries to figure out traction and reality. For about a second, they're together. Then the Grand National does the thing where it stops being a car and starts being an event. That turbo torque hits, the Buick surges ahead, and the loud car's engine note turns into pure confusion. You can practically hear the driver thinking, wait, was that a Buick? We're not out there disappearing into the horizon. We're not doing anything unsafe. It's just a clean, quick pull that makes the point. And the point is not, I'm faster than you forever. The point is, you underestimated the wrong vehicle. Back at the next light, the loud car pulls up again, but the posture has changed. The sideways glance is gone. Now it's straight ahead, hands at 10 and 2, like he's suddenly remembered he has responsibilities. The owner looks over at me and says something like, "People forget what these are." And I laughed, because that's exactly it. The Grand National lives on people forgetting. It lives on assumptions. It lives on the idea that a Buick should be quiet and soft and harmless. And then it teaches you a lesson in boost theology. Sometimes the scariest thing on the road is the car that doesn't need to brag. And honestly, every time I see one now, I still do the respectful face. Because I learned the hard way that Buick isn't trying to impress you. It's trying to get away with it.